Part 13. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Ju Yi. Chapter 121. A week before the due date, Wei Yuxian moved into the hospital for fear of any accidents. The hospital we went to was of course Lin Chenjiayuan's hospital. As Fu Xuanyi's good brother, Lin Chengyuan naturally did not charge any fees and also provided the best ward. After arriving at the hospital, I did not lie or sit on the bed every day. Instead, I performed some labor-inducing activities every day based on the doctor's advice. Wei Yuxian moved into the hospital and needed someone to take care of her, so Aunt Fu and a few servants came with her. Fu's father and Fu's mother were also admitted to the hospital and stayed with Wei Yuxian every day. Even Fu Xuanyi comes to the hospital to stay with people after get off work every day. Wei Yuxian looked down at her belly. It was so swollen that even if she was wearing short sleeves, her feet could not be seen. They were completely covered by her belly. Also, as the birth was approaching, she became nervous. Because when she usually watches videos, she learns a lot about pregnant women's childbirth knowledge, such as side incisions, lochia, and sagging skin. Anyway, it sounded very scary, especially the side cut, which made Wei Yuxian feel terrified. There are also some pregnant women who will develop stretch marks, which look terrible. The strips of stretch marks circle on the belly, as if the skin has been maliciously injured. She was very lucky that she didn't have any stretch marks, and she didn't know if it was because she insisted on applying pregnancy oil every day. However, she also said that stretch marks are determined by a person's physical constitution. If that person's constitution is prone to stretch marks, then applying pregnancy oil will not be of much use. Now it seems that she is not in a good shape to have stretch marks. The day before the due date, Wei Yuxian was even more nervous. She didn't know whether the baby would come out on time or whether it would be delayed or something. She would touch her belly from time to time to see how the baby was doing. She would even ask the baby softly, "When are you willing to come out?" Naturally, no one responded to her. Fu's mother, who had been by her side, could see her nervousness. After all, this was Yuxian's first child and she had little experience. In addition, she is a little girl, has not experienced much, and does not yet have the ability and psychology to be a mother. She patted her hand and reassured her, "Yuxian, don't be nervous. The doctor is here. If there is a situation, the doctor can arrive in time." Wei Yuxian was still nervous, taking deep breaths and saying, "I just feel a little scared when I think about people saying that giving birth is not easy." Fu's mother is someone who has been through it and knows what the situation is like. Everyone's birth situation is different. Some people have it easy, while others have difficulty. When she gave birth to Xian, it was more difficult because she was quite old at the time and Xian was big, so he had to suffer a lot. At that time, some root causes of diseases were also left behind, and they were recovered after taking good care of them over the years. Giving birth is indeed an emotionally draining event. She said, "Everyone's situation is different. Maybe your delivery will be smoother. Don't be nervous and relax." Wei Yuxian took a sip of water to moisten her dry mouth and said, "I have no experience, and it's twins. I heard that twins will be more difficult to give birth to." Fu's mother comforted her again, and she became less nervous. Now, they don't know whether the child in their belly is a boy or a girl, or whether they are twins. With the current level of development of hospitals, it is possible to know the gender, although this is illegal. But there are always some people who will use various means to find out the gender of the fetus. But the Fu family doesn't pay attention to this. For them, it doesn't matter whether it's a boy or a girl. What's important is that this is the blood of the Fu family. And, whether it's a boy or a girl, they will love them and give them everything they have. In the afternoon, Wei Yuxian woke up from a nap, feeling a little hungry, and ate the fruit that Aunt Fu had cut for her. While he was eating, Lin Chenyuan came in with a bag of things, with a big smile on his face. For those who didn't know, he thought he was about to give birth to his child. However, he was indeed happy that Master Xian had a child, even happier than having a child himself. Who told Master Xian to start a single line of inheritance? In more serious cases, the heir may be exterminated. Fortunately, God favored Mr. Xian and gave him 2 children at once. He put the things on the bedside table and called, uncle, aunt, sister-in-law. Fu's father and mother responded to him, and Wei Yuxian also smiled at him and said Fu's mother saw him coming in with a bag of things, the packaging was quite exquisite, and asked, "What did you bring?" Lin Chenyuan picked up the bag again, took out the contents, and opened the package. There were 2 longevity locks made of pure gold inside. There is a word on the lock, and there are 3 small bells hanging below. The small one looks very cute. He said, "This is for the children in my sister-in-law's belly, 1 for each of them." He conveniently put the 2 longevity locks on Wei Yuxian's hands and said, "Sister-in-law, see if you are satisfied with it. If you are not satisfied, I will have someone change it." Wei Yuxian took the 2 heavy longevity locks, weighed them, and guessed that the 2 longevity locks were solid. She didn't really want to take it, because the price of these 2 things was definitely not cheap, they were solid, the design was so exquisite, and the workmanship was very fine. But this was Lin Chenjiayuan's kindness, and it was given to his 2 children. She couldn't refuse it, so she could only turn her attention to Fu's mother. Ask for help. Fu's mother said, "Keep it, it's Xiao Cheng's sincere thought." Lin Chenyuan also said, "Yes, sister-in-law, just keep it. I am giving it to the child, not to you. At worst, when I have a child, you can return the gift to me." Hearing this, Wei Yuxian could only accept it, solemnly put the 2 longevity locks back into the box, covered them, and protected them well. Lin Chenyuan stayed here for a while, delivered the things, chatted for a while, and then went to the dean's office to chat with the dean. When it was time to prepare for dinner, Fu Xuanyi came over from work. As soon as he came to the ward, he kissed Wei Yuxian on the forehead, completely ignoring that his father and mother were still there. Wei Yuxian gave him an angry look, blushed slightly, and looked at the old lady and Mr. Fu to see what their expressions were. Unexpectedly, the 2 old people knew this and had already turned their heads to the side, pretending to look at the scenery. Wei Yuxian also breathed a sigh of relief and glared at Fu Xuanyi again, as if to say, "Don't do this next time." Fu Xuanyi smiled slightly and replied with his eyes, "Okay, I'll do it next time." After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 122. On the day of the due date, Wei Yuxian became even more nervous and kept paying attention to the movement of her belly. But after paying attention for a long time, there was no movement in her belly. The 2 babies seemed unwilling to come out. On this day, Fu Xuanyi did not go to the company and stayed with her in the hospital. According to the doctor's advice, Wei Yuxian did serious labor-inducing exercises every day, but the baby in her belly just didn't want to come out. At the end of the day, nothing happened, and her stomach was extremely quiet. Wei Yuxian could only wait anxiously. In the evening, Fu's father and Fu's mother left the ward, leaving only Wei Yuxian and Fu Xuanyi in the room. During these days in the hospital, Fu Xuanyi slept on the same bed as Wei Yuxian. Wei Yuxian was afraid that he would crush the child and asked him to sleep in another room. He was unwilling and cautiously wanted to sleep with her. Wei Yuxian had no choice but to agree to sleep in the same bed with him. Actually, after so many days and sleeping with Fu Xuanyi for a long time, she had long been accustomed to sharing the same bed with this man. Especially when the weather is cold, a man's arms are unusually warm, making it very comfortable to sleep on. If she suddenly slept alone, she might not be used to it. And she also understood her own mind clearly, and knew why she had those strange reactions. The reason was she liked Fu Xuanyi. Although this man was cold to her at the beginning, kept a straight face all day long, and was very domineering, he was really kind to her. When he encountered difficulties, he was the one who gave him a helping hand, and when he was wronged, he was the one who vented his anger for himself. When she was weak, he gave her the courage to become strong. In short, this man is very, very good. How could she not like him when he is such a good person? However, she has never expressed this feeling. One reason is that she is embarrassed to say it, and another reason is that she feels that now is not the time. Let's not talk about this, let's get back to the present. After Wei Yuxian came out of the shower, she dried herself, lay on the bed and yawned. After Fu Xuanyi came out of the shower, he sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the sleepy person on the bed. He caressed Wei Yuxian's bulging belly through her clothes, very gently, and asked, "When are you willing to come out?" Wei Yuxian turned her head to look at him. At night, the man's body was dimmed by a layer of light, which made him look warmer instead of cold. Such gentle Fu Xuanyi appeared in front of her many times. She was fascinated by his appearance at this moment, and she wanted to kiss him in such a beautiful atmosphere. Such a picture must be very beautiful. That feeling must be wonderful. But Wei Yuxian is a thin-skinned person, and she was so shy even with this idea, let alone taking action. Fu Xuanyi talked to the baby in his belly for a while, then lifted some of Wei Yuxian's clothes and left a gentle kiss on her belly. He often kissed her like this. Wei Yuxian's eyes were soft, and the corners of her mouth were slightly raised unconsciously. Fu Xuanyi likes these two children, and there is no denying this. In fact, she was a little scared. Fu Xuanyi only kept the two children because they had the blood of the Fu family, but he didn't like them. She didn't want her child to lack love, whether it was father's love or mother's love. Because she has never felt the love of her parents since she was a child and knows what it feels like, she does not want her children to follow in her footsteps. After Fu Xuanyi kissed her belly, he raised his head and looked into her eyes. In an instant, sparks bloomed. Wei Yuxian quickly looked away, turned her head to the side, and closed her eyes to cover up, her heart pounding. Fu Xuanyi turned off the light, went to bed, held her in his arms, rubbed her head, and said, "Don't think so much, just go to sleep." Wei Yuxian said and felt the man's temperature. In her ears was the sound of the man's breathing, and in her nose was the smell of the man. Her whole body was wrapped in men. Not long after, she fell asleep. She turned over in her sleep, faced the man, and slid into his arms, feeling extremely at ease. It's like the sky is falling, but she doesn't have to be afraid, because she has this man supporting her. In the next 2 days, there was still no movement in Wei Yuxian's stomach, so Fu Xuanyi went back to the company to work. "I haven't been in the company for 3 days in a row, and the documents were sent over by Assistant Guan for processing. Now, it's impossible not to go back." He gave Wei Yuxian instructions and was very worried. After Wei Yuxian repeatedly promised that people would stay with her and never leave her, Fu Xuanyi went to work with peace of mind. Unexpectedly, on the afternoon when Fu Xuanyi went to work, Wei Yuxian's stomach started to move. After she had a feeling at first, she was afraid that something would go wrong, so she immediately told the old lady. So, within a minute, the doctor rushed to the ward and immediately arranged surgery for Wei Yuxian. Within half an hour, Wei Yuxian was pushed into the operating room. Fu's mother immediately called Fu Xuanyi and told him that Wei Yuxian was going to give birth. Fu Xuanyi, who had only been at work for half a day and had made up for the missed meetings, immediately stopped the meeting and drove to the hospital without thinking about anything else. He arrived outside the operating room as quickly as possible and waited with Fu's father and Fu's mother. After a while, Lin Chenyuan also came, panting, and asked, how long has it been since sister-in-law went in? Fu's mother said, it hasn't been long. After a while, Lu Chengxiao also rushed over. He didn't know where he got the news and was able to arrive in such a short time. A group of people were waiting anxiously outside the operating room, and no sound was heard. Fu Xuanyi was sitting on the chair. His face looked unchanged and he still looked cold, but his heart was far from being so calm. He took off the prayer beads from his wrist, put them in his palm, and twisted them again and again, suppressing the tension in his heart. Time passed minute by minute, and there was still no movement in the operating room. Fu Xuanyi couldn't wait any longer. He wanted to see the person he missed immediately and learn about her current condition. At this time, the director of the hospital was also accompanying him. In the next room, there were several top doctors from the hospital on standby. This is Master Xian's child, no one dares to neglect it. Everyone knows how much the Fu family values their heirs. Fu Xuanyi stood up, walked step by step to the dean, and said, "Take me in." The dean was startled when he heard what he said. He quickly stood up and said, "Master Xian, you'd better not go in." Fu Xuanyi didn't give him any room for negotiation. Immediately, the tough attitude made the dean break into a cold sweat, so he could only take people to disinfect, put on sterile clothes, and enter the delivery room. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 123. After Fu Xuanyi followed him in, an unknown amount of time passed before a baby's cry came from the delivery room. In an instant, everyone outside breathed a sigh of relief. Finally it was born. But they were not completely relieved because they didn't know what Wei Yuxian's situation was. They all say that when you give birth to a child, you have to go through the gate of hell. This is true. If you don't do well, you really have to see the Lord of Hell. I just hope that mother and son are safe. Fu's mother looked at the door of the operating room and prayed silently in her heart, praying that God would favor the Fu family. The Fu family finally had a new bloodline, but it was best not to have any accidents. Time passed little by little, and no one had the intention to see how long the time had passed. Anyway, after a long time, the door to the operating room finally opened, and two nurses came out with two children in their arms. Later, Wei Yuxian was also pushed out and fainted due to the exertion of too much energy in giving birth. There was always a figure beside her, following her every step of the way, and that was Fu Xuanyi. After the child came out, he just glanced at it and then turned his attention back to Wei Yuxian. His eyes were full of worry, and he couldn't fake it. Compared to the two children, his obedience is the most important. Fortunately, Guigui's delivery went smoothly this time, and there were no problems. It just took too much effort, otherwise. Outside, people who had been waiting saw the operating room door finally opened and immediately swarmed up. The nurse had a smile on her face and said, "Congratulations, mother and child are safe, they are twins." The children in the hands of the two nurses stopped crying and fell asleep. Just now in the operating room, they cried loudly, which also shows that the two children are very healthy. Wei Yuxian was carefully cared for during her pregnancy. The amount of food she ate every day was prescribed, and she also did regular exercises. Therefore, the two children were very healthy. After Fu's mother glanced at the two children, tears suddenly filled her eyes. Then she walked to Fu Xuanyi and looked down at the sleeping Wei Yuxian. Asked, "How is Yuxian?" "Nothing happened." Fu Xuanyi shook his head and said, "It went very smoothly." Fu's mother wiped away her tears and said, "That's good. Push Yuxian back to the ward quickly and let her have a good rest." When they returned to the ward, everyone was silent and silent. If they had to speak, their voices would be very low. There were so many people in a small ward. Fu Xuanyi felt that it was not good to have too many people here, as it seemed too crowded. Also, he didn't want so many people to look at his obedience. So, he invited everyone out and stayed in the room, sitting on the chair next to the hospital bed, holding Wei Yuxian's little hand, waiting quietly for her to wake up. "Thank you for your hard work, my dear. In the future, I will treat you better and give you whatever you want." He looked at the person on the bed, his eyes filled with distress. Wei Yuxian's face was a little pale, and even her normally bright red lips turned a little whiter, making her look very weak. Fu Xuanyi looked at the person for a while, and couldn't help but kissed her on the forehead restrainedly and gently. And then, and again, and it's never enough. Outside the ward, Lu Changxiao and Lin Chenyuan spent a day in the hospital and finally breathed a sigh of relief when they saw the baby was delivered safely. Then they remembered one thing, that is, they forgot to congratulate Master Xian, but now, it was the same with Mr. Fu and Mrs. Fu. Lu Changxiao said first, "Master, Madam, congratulations. Congratulations to the Fu family on their daughter's son." Lin Chenyuan also said, "Congratulations, uncle and aunt. Master Xian finally has a descendant. You two elders can rest assured." Father Fu said to indicate that he had received their blessings. Fu's mother said a little more, "Thank you. Xiao Chang, speaking of which, I would also like to thank you. If you hadn't let Xian that night, we wouldn't have known such a good child as you Xian. It is impossible to add 3 new members to the Fu family in such a short period of time." Lin Chenyuan waved his hand and said, "Auntie, if you want to thank me, just thank you. I was also trying to complete your mission. Let's not talk about this. It's a happy day. By the way, when will the 2 children be delivered? I didn't even see it clearly just now." Lu Changxiao also expressed his interest and said, Yes, I also want to meet the young master and young lady." Fu's mother thought about the time when she gave birth to a child, and said, "It should be soon. It will be delivered soon." Just as they were talking, 2 nurses brought the children over. Father Fu and Mother Fu each took one and said thank you to the nurses. The nurse said, "You're welcome, ma'am. The baby has just been born, so it's better to keep it as close to the mother as possible." Fu's mother nodded, with a kind look on her face, and said, "Okay, let's take a look." The 2 nurses gave a few more instructions before leaving. In her arms, the 2 babies were still sleeping. They had been cleaned by the nurse, wrapped in a small quilt, and slept peacefully. Father Fu and Mother Fu couldn't help laughing when they looked at the child in their arms. Lu Changxiao and Lin Chenyuan hurried forward and whispered, let me see. Father Fu and Mother Fu showed them that the 2 children were small, a little wrinkled, and not very good looking. But in the eyes of Father Fu and Mother Fu, these 2 babies were little angels. Lu Changxiao and Lin Chenyuan looked at each other for a while, but they couldn't tell which of the 2 children looked more alike. Moreover, the 2 children were different from what they imagined. In their impression, children are fair and tender, with bouncy skin, and they look very cute. But these 2 little angels. Lin Chenyuan hesitated and said, "Auntie, why are they so wrinkled?" Fu's mother laughed when she heard this and said, "Newborn children are like this, and you were also like this when you were just born." Lin Chenyuan and Lu Changxiao said somewhat disbelieving. The former asked again, "Then when will it become fair and tender? Aren't all children fair and tender?" "It will take a few days, and then the child will look better," Mother Fu said. "I think our little angel is also very good looking now." Lu Changxiao and Lin Chenyuan looked at each other and said no more. The children had seen enough. Father Fu and Mother Fu thought of what the nurse had just said and walked into the ward with the 2 children in their arms. It was dark in the ward, not even the bedside lamp was turned on. It was also pitch black outside, it was night. Father Fu and Mother Fu walked over slowly and softly with the two children in their arms, placed the two children next to Wei Yuxian, and whispered, "You should also take a look at the children." After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 124. Fu Xuanyi took one look at the children. At this moment, taking advantage of his free time, he leaned over and looked at the two children bit by bit. Then, the same doubts as Lu Changxiao and Lin Chengyuan appeared. He asked in a low voice, "Is the child unhealthy? Otherwise, why would it look so wrinkled?" His face was red. Fu's mother patted him and said, "Don't talk nonsense, the child is very healthy. Newborn children are like this, and they will be fine in 2 or 3 days." Fu Xuanyi didn't believe it. He said oh and stopped asking questions. At around 10 o'clock in the evening, Wei Yuxian finally had enough rest and opened her tired eyes. Fu Xuanyi noticed her movement for the first time and said, "Wake up." Wei Yuxian was still very weak. She slowly turned her head, looked at the man who was still wearing a suit, and said She knew that this man came over in a hurry while at work and didn't even change his clothes. When she was in the delivery room, a man also came in from behind, giving her a lot of courage and letting her grit her teeth and persevere. Now, after sleeping for so long, when I opened my eyes again, the first person I saw was him. This feeling is so good. She felt warm in her heart, looking at Fu Xuanyi's eyes with deep love that she didn't even know she had. Then she thought of the child and asked, "Where is the child? Is it a boy or a girl?" Fu Xuanyi pointed to her side and said, "Here are the twins. Be good, this is our child." Wei Yuxian turned her head and wanted to see the two children, but she couldn't see clearly while lying down, so she wanted to get up to see more clearly. But as soon as she moved, she felt some tearing in her lower body, and a pain came up. She gave birth painlessly, so she didn't feel any discomfort at that time, but it took too much effort. Now that the effect of the medicine has worn off, I feel a little pain down there. She hissed, looking a little painful. Fu Xuanyi immediately became nervous, held her down and told her not to move, and said, "Don't move." Wei Yuxian looked into his eyes and said, "Help me up. I want to see the baby." Fu Xuanyi was afraid that she would be in pain and did not move. But after a while, when he saw her wet eyes, he couldn't help but feel soft and carefully helped her sit up. He sat down by the bed, turned on the light in the ward, and then picked up one of the children, his movements very unfamiliar, and put it in front of Wei Yuxian for her to see. Wei Yuxian lowered her head and looked at the little baby who was still sleeping. Her eyes were closed tightly and she was sleeping soundly. There is also another baby who sleeps very soundly. Wei Yuxian gently poked the baby's face, and a sweet smile appeared on her face. She didn't dislike the baby at all because he was wrinkled. She had read about it on the internet a long time ago. The doctor said that newborn babies are like this and they will be fine after a few days. Looking at the two little children, a warm current flowed through Wei Yuxian's heart, and she had a very strange feeling. This is her child, a child with the same blood as her. Also, she is the only two people in this world who are related by blood. Love is such a wonderful thing. Wei Yuxian liked her children very much before they were born. Now that she finally saw them, she liked them even more. She raised her head and said, "Axuan, I want to hold the baby." She stretched out her hand, wanting Fu Xuanyi to put the baby in her hand. Fu Xuanyi hesitated and said, "It will hurt." Wei Yuxian shook her head and said, "It's okay. It just hurt a little bit just now. It's much better now." Fu Xuanyi said again, "You have no strength." Wei Yuxian moved her arms and found that they were indeed a little soft. She was afraid that she would not be able to hold the child and dropped the child, So she could only watch helplessly. Dong dong dong, a gentle knock on the door sounded. Fu Xuanyi said come in, and the ward door was opened. The people who came in were Fu's father, Fu's mother, and Aunt Fu, who was holding a food box in her hand. Wei Yuxian hadn't eaten anything since lunch, and she was very hungry now. Aunt Fu came at the right time. Fu's mother came to Wei Yuxian and asked with concern, "Yuxian, how do you feel? Are you feeling uncomfortable anywhere else?" Wei Yuxian was embarrassed to say that it hurt a little, so she said, "It's okay, I'm fine. It's not very painful there, it's still bearable, and it should be fine in 2 days." She saw other mothers saying this. "That's good, Mother Fu said, come on, let's eat something quickly. You must be hungry, right?" Wei Yuxian touched her empty belly, said and said, "Thank you, madam." Wei Yuxian ate the meal in small bites. This meal was a nutritious meal specially made by the chef at home. It was light and easy to digest and tasted pretty good. Fu Xuanyi had been hungry for about a day, so he ate with Wei Yuxian. While they were eating, Fu's mother asked, "Have you given the child a name?" Wei Yuxian was stunned and forgot about it. She had been busy studying in class a few days ago and didn't think of it. She said, "I didn't think of this. Let Xian get up." Fu's mother then looked at her son, who swallowed the food in his mouth, and said, "Think about it a few times." He took out his phone and found a few names that he had thought of in his free time. Fu's mother looked at them and felt satisfied with each one. She couldn't make up her mind and said, "Let Yuxian take a look. Yuxian, which name do you want?" Fu Xuanyi brought the phone to her and asked her to look at the names. Wei Yuxian looked at the names several times and came up with 2 names that she liked. However, she did not decide directly. Instead, she said, "Master, let's take a look at them too. Maybe the master's opinion is different from hers." Father Fu said, "It's up to you to decide." The Fu family gave her the right to name their child, which was also a recognition of her. Wei Yuxian looked at the people present. Everyone had no objections, and then said, "Then my brother's name is Shi Wen, and my sister's name is Zhixu." These 2 names came from the last 2 lines of Snow at Night by Bai Juyi, and she thought they sounded very nice. Fu's mother recited the 2 names on both sides and said, "Okay. Let's call them Shi Wen and Zhixu. When I hear them, they are brother and sister." So, the names of the 2 babies were decided. Now that I have decided on a big name, I need to think of a nickname so that I can call her easily. This time, Fu's mother still asked Wei Yuxian to pick it up, saying that she picked it nicely. Wei Yuxian racked her brains while eating, and finally came up with 2 nicknames when she was done eating. It's also very simple. My brother's name is Shishi, and my sister's name is Zhizi. They are the words in their names, which are nice to hear and easy to remember. Mother Fu immediately clapped her hands and applauded. "Okay. Great. That's it. From now on, our Fu family will have 2 more babies." After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Juyi. Chapter 125. Wei Yuxian had a natural birth. The birth went smoothly and there were no physical problems. The 2 babies were also very healthy. After staying in the hospital for another 3 days, they were discharged and went home to recuperate. Although it is much more convenient in the hospital, the care is ultimately inferior to that at home. In addition, people who give birth naturally can be discharged from the hospital in 2 or 3 days. After returning home, Wei Yuxian was treated like a golden pimple. Fu Xuanyi also stayed with her in the hospital for 3 days before going to work in the company. If possible, he would even like to spend more time with Wei Yuxian. However, he couldn't be absent for too long in the company, so he had to go to work every day, but every day, he would leave work half an hour early, just to come back quickly to see the person he missed. Within 3 days, Wei Yuxian felt much better and began her official confinement period. The two babies have also become better looking. The one is white and tender, the one with small eyes and nose is very cute. Wei Yuxian liked Shishi and Zhizi very much. She would look at them every day, hold them in her arms and kiss them on the face from time to time. Fu's father and Fu's mother are reluctant to leave here anymore, and the Fu family's old house is now empty. Their grandchildren are all here, how could they be willing to leave? In the evening, Fu Xuanyi, who had been working at the company all day, got off work early, drove as fast as he could, and returned home as quickly as possible. As soon as he entered the door, he asked, "Where is Madam?" Aunt Fu said with a smile on her face, "The Madam and the young master are in the room, and the old lady is also up there." Fu Xuanyi said changed his shoes, washed his hands, and went to Wei Yuxian's room. The steps were a little hurried, wanting to see his obedience as soon as possible. He opened the door and walked in. Sure enough, he saw the person he missed most in the room, and his mother and two children were also inside. When Wei Yuxian saw the person coming back, she turned her head, a smile appeared on her face, and shouted, "Actuan." Yeah, he walked in, called Mom and sat down next to Wei Yuxian. Wei Yuxian was chatting with the old lady in the room while Shishi and Zhizi were sleeping in their own small beds. The two little guys were still holding hands together, a subconscious move. Wei Yuxian never wanted to be separated from her two children for a moment. She wanted to see them every moment, even if they fell asleep. Maybe it's because she just became a mother, and she really doesn't want to leave her two babies. If it weren't for the fear of rolling over and crushing the two babies when she went to bed at night, she would have wanted to put the babies into bed and sleep together. Fu Xuanyi took Wei Yuxian's hand into his own, played with it carefully, and asked, "Are you feeling uncomfortable today?" Wei Yuxian shook her head, without pulling her hand back, and said, "I don't feel uncomfortable anymore. Everything is fine." "That's good," Fu Xuanyi said. "Is the baby good?" Wei Yuxian recalled the situation of the babies today and said, "Zhizi cried 5 times, cried 4 times from time to time, and slept most of the time. Are you tired?" "I'm not tired. I don't look at them all the time. I take a nap," she replied one by one. Seeing them getting along so peacefully, Fu's mother was very pleased and said, "Don't worry, Aishian, can you still make Yuxian tired at home? We are watching." "Thank you for your hard work, Mom." After sitting in the room for a while, it was dinner time, and the two babies still hadn't woken up. They slept for more than 20 hours a day. "When I wake up, I drink milk and then go back to sleep." They waited until the two nannies came in to look after the children, then went downstairs to eat. After dinner, Wei Yuxian walked slowly in the living room for about 10 minutes before going back to the room. After going to see the two babies again, Fu Xuanyi followed her footsteps and returned to the room. As soon as she returned, Wei Yuxian heard the cries of the two babies, who had woken up. She quickly walked over, held Zhizi in her arms, and gently shook her arms to comfort her. "Don't cry if you know it, don't cry if you don't cry, Mom is here," she said soothing words while shaking her arms. Fu Xuanyi also took Shishi from the nanny's hand, hugging him with unfamiliar movements, imitating Wei Yuxian's movements and shaking his arms to comfort the child. Compared with the first time, Fu Xuanyi's movements are much more skillful. The small one in his arm makes Fu Xuanyi look very tall. At this time, the nanny who was watching Wei Yuxian coaxing the child said, "Master Xian, Madam, the young master is hungry and it's time to breastfeed." Wei Yuxian smiled at the two nannies and said, "I understand, Auntie, you can go out first." "Okay, Madam, if anything happens, just call us and we'll be at the door." After saying that, the two nannies walked out. In the room, only Wei Yuxian and Fu Xuanyi were left, as well as Shishi's Zhizi, who kept crying. Wei Yuxian hugged Zizi and sat down on the bed. She looked at the man, bit her lower lip and said, "Put Shishi down and go out, I'm going to feed them." She was a little embarrassed to say the last sentence. Fu Xuanyi put Shishi on the bed next to Wei Yuxian and said, "I won't look at it." Instead of walking out of the room, he walked to the chair over there and sat down, with his back to the person. His strong back seemed to tell Wei Yuxian, "I really won't watch." Wei Yuxian bit her lower lip again and said nothing, tacitly agreeing to sit there. She first fed Zizi in her arms. As soon as Zizi had food, he immediately stopped crying and concentrated on eating. She was still crying, so Wei Yuxian could only stretch out one hand, pat him gently, and said, She, wait a moment, it will be fine in a while, wait until sister finishes eating." As she said that, she raised her head and looked in the direction of the man to see what his reaction was. When she saw that the man's back was still as firm and unchanged, she breathed a sigh of relief. Speaking of which, this was the first time she breastfed 2 children in front of Fu Xuanyi. In the past 2 days, she had been at staggered times and no one had encountered her. Doctors say that it is best for newborn babies to breastfeed, because breast milk contains many things that formula milk does not, and the baby can absorb and adapt to it better. Therefore, Wei Yuxian listened to the doctor's advice and chose to breastfeed. After Zizi had eaten enough, the time changed. The former was put on the bed. He stopped crying and did not sleep for a while. He was rarely awake. After Shishi got food, he stopped crying and wolfed down his food even more fiercely than Zizi just now. While Wei Yuxian was breastfeeding, she paid attention to Fu Xuanyi's movements, fearing that he would suddenly turn around. Fortunately, the man kept his promise and never turned around after saying not to look, which also made Wei Yuxian breathe a sigh of relief. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Ju Yi. Chapter 126. After feeding them, Wei Yuxian put the 2 children on the bed, put down their clothes, and said, Axuan, take a look at the baby, and I'll take a bath. Fu Xuanyi walked over and said Seeing that her face was slightly red, he couldn't help but curl his lips and smile. Wei Yuxian blushed a little more, quickly found a set of pajamas, and went into the bathroom to take a shower. Outside, Fu Xuanyi was sitting on the bed, looking at the 2 babies on the bed. He noticed that there was a trace of milk stains on the corner of Shishi's mouth. He didn't know what he thought of and narrowed his eyes. He took out a wet wipe and wiped the mouths of Shishi and Zizi, then walked to the door and let the 2 nannies come in and take the children away. The 2 nannies, each with a child, burped them and went downstairs to find the old lady. After the child drinks milk, it is best to burp it, which can effectively prevent the child from spitting up milk. Wei Yuxian came out of the shower and saw Fu Xuanyi was the only one left in the room, so she asked, Where is the baby? Fu Xuanyi said, Hiccup. Wei Yuxian said oh and said, at this point, the filming should be finished. She wanted to take the baby back. But Fu Xuanyi stepped forward and hugged her, saying, they fell asleep. Wei Yuxian could only stop thinking about it, sit down on the chair, and use a hair dryer to dry her hair. Because the children are still young, they do not sleep with them at night. They sleep in the room next to them and are watched by a dedicated nanny around the clock. After giving birth to the baby, she had not washed her hair or bathed, and her body felt uncomfortable. The doctor said she could not wash her hair until 3 days later. So tonight, she couldn't wait to wash it. After washing, I feel much better all over. It's hot now, and it feels very uncomfortable if I don't take a shower for a day. Fortunately, she didn't sweat much at home, otherwise, she would have been even more uncomfortable. Fu Xuanyi walked over, stood behind her, took the hair dryer, and blew her hair. Wei Yuxian paused, said nothing, and silently accepted his service. There is someone blow drying your hair. To be honest, it is quite comfortable. You don't have to hold your hands up all the time, so you won't feel tired. Fu Xuanyi's movements were very gentle, and his big hands stroked her hair, as if he were touching a treasure. After blow-drying her hair, Wei Yuxian yawned and felt a little sleepy, but she didn't want to go to bed so soon, so she played with her mobile phone on the bed. Fu Xuanyi went into the bathroom to take a shower, while Wei Yuxian was watching videos on the bed. Nowadays, most of the videos she watches are about mothers and obstetricians and gynecologists. She enjoys listening to the mothers talk about their experiences. As she watched, she felt less sleepy and became more energetic. Fu Xuanyi came out of the shower. His bathrobe was loose and his hair was half dry. He let it down, making him look younger. He glanced at the person on the bed, who was looking at his phone seriously and not paying attention to himself at all. He narrowed his eyes and looked a little dangerous when he saw the plump place. He remembered again that the two children were eating tonight. The food rations for the two children are really good, and he has never even enjoyed them. After drying his hair absent-mindedly, he walked to the bed and sat down. The person on the bed still didn't even look at him, completely attracted by the mobile phone. He felt a little unhappy inside and shouted, "Be good." Wei Yuxian said and watched the doctor's popular science video carefully, fascinated. Fu Xuanyi listened to the voice playing on the phone. It was a female doctor. Her voice sounded like she was a little older. I thought, she is so attractive, how can she be more attractive than myself? Why, all your thoughts are focused on her. Feeling unhappy to the extreme, he stretched out his hand, covered her phone with his big hand, and said, "Look at me." Wei Yuxian could only look away from the phone, looked at the man in confusion, and asked, "What's wrong?" Fu Xuanyi asked seriously, "Does the phone look better, or do I look better?" Wei Yuxian. "So, this man is comparing with a mobile phone?" She said, "I am watching popular science videos, and I think what the doctors say makes sense." Fu Xuanyi was not led astray by her and asked again, "Does the phone look better, or do I look better?" It was the same as what he said just now, every word was exactly the same, and even the tone and expression were exactly the same. Wei Yuxian didn't know how to answer this question, but when she thought about this man's character, he wouldn't give up if she didn't answer. After thinking for a while, he took a deep breath and said with a slight blush on his face, "You look good." In fact, there is no comparison between the two. Fu Xuanyi is a person, and the mobile phone is just an object. There is no need to compare. But this man insisted on comparing himself to a mobile phone, so Wei Yuxian could only follow his lead. However, this man does look better than his cell phone, there is no doubt about it. His face is prettier than most celebrities. She didn't tell lies either. Her answer made Fu Xuanyi feel a little better, but only a little. He was still very jealous that his darling was so addicted to mobile phones. He took Wei Yuxian's cell phone away, threw it on the bedside table, turned off the light, and said, "My dear, it's time to go to bed." Sleeping here is definitely not a simple verb. Wei Yuxian was not sleepy yet and wanted to watch the popular science video, but just as she was about to speak, she saw Fu Xuanyi's eyes, and instantly she no longer wanted to look at her phone. She quickly found a quilt, trying to wrap herself in it. Because Fu Xuanyi's eyes at this moment are too dangerous. She had seen Fu Xuanyi look like this many times, but he rarely succeeded. It was only once when she was pregnant. Now, this look appears again. No matter how fast Wei Yuxian was, she couldn't compare to Fu Xuanyi's hands. He took the quilt away and threw it to the end of the bed, cutting off Wei Yuxian's escape. Wei Yuxian protected her belly, thinking that the lokia had not been drained out yet, so she said, "No, not now." Fu Xuanyi knew that he couldn't do it now. Not to mention that Guiguai's lokia had not been cleared away, but because Guiguai's body had just given birth, he really couldn't have sex. However, he can get some other sweeteners, such as food rations for the babies. He touched Wei Yuxian's frightened face and said, "Be good, I know." Wei Yuxian stretched out her hand to push him, pushed hard, and said, "Then get up quickly, I'm going to bed." "Good boy, I want to." "No, you don't. You don't think about anything," Wei Yuxian interrupted him hastily, preventing him from saying what he said next. "Although I don't know what he is going to say, what he is going to say next is definitely not a good thing." Fu Xuanyi chuckled, lifted up her pajamas, and under her horrified eyes, leaned down and kissed the soft piece. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 127. Wei Yuxian couldn't believe that Fu Xuanyi would do such a thing. This is really too much to say. With a face so red that it could bleed, she wrapped herself completely in the quilt without any gaps showing, treating herself as a real ostrich. She held her chest, and there was still a wet feeling there. She was so ashamed that she wanted to pass out on the spot. Outside the quilt, Fu Xuanyi was full, in the true sense of the word. He looked at the small bulge on the bed, recalled the taste just now, and couldn't help but lick his lips to savor it. "It's so delicious. No wonder the two little guys like it so much. Not to mention the two little guys, even he likes it too." He even wanted to come again, but unfortunately, his darling was too easily shy. He lazily leaned on the bed, stretched out his finger, poked the cute little ball, and shouted in a voice that could charm thousands of girls, "Be good." Wei Yuxian twisted her body under the quilt, and the white thing also moved, but no sound came from inside. Wei Yuxian doesn't want to say a word to this man now. Not a single word. She doesn't want to accept this man. This man is evil. He actually did such a thing. How could he, how could he? This is obviously the rations for the babies, but he. Thinking like this, Wei Yuxian recalled the scene just now. The man was so domineering and powerful that he didn't give her any chance to resist. Ah! Stop thinking about it. Stop thinking about Wei Yuxian. Just as she was thinking about those scenes that were not suitable for children, the quilt wrapping her was pulled up by the man outside. Fu Xuanyi said, "Come out quickly, dear." He began to dig out the quilt, trying to dig the person out. Wei Yuxian desperately held down the quilt, not wanting to face the man outside at this time. She just wanted to pretend to be dead. Fu Xuanyi dug desperately, Wei Yuxian pulled desperately, neither of them gave way to the other. But how could Wei Yuxian be as strong as Fu Xuanyi? In addition, she had spent a lot of energy struggling just now, and now she was just a non-threatening little kitty. Fu Xuanyi dug the person out without much effort. The little person under the quilt had a red face, like a ripe tomato, and was extremely shy. Wei Yuxian still wanted to hide, not wanting to appear in front of the man, but as soon as she moved over there, the man stopped her with his big hand. I saw the man using his big hands to pull the person over easily and into his arms. He touched Wei Yuxian's red face, with a faint smile on his lips, which looked very nice, and said, "Good boy, are you hot? Isn't it hot if you have to stay suffocated under the quilt in the middle of summer?" He touched her forehead again, felt a thin layer of sweat, and wiped it for her. Wei Yuxian lowered her head, said nothing, and twisted her body to get off him. Fu Xuanyi hugged her tightly, not giving her a chance to escape, and said, "Don't move, it will be dangerous if you move again. If he moves again, it won't be just like that just now, and he won't be able to help it." With Xianjiao in his arms, he is a man who has been abstinent for a long time, so it is indeed difficult to control him. Hearing this, Wei Yuxian seemed to feel something under her body change slightly, and she was immediately frightened and dared not move. She didn't want to think about it now, not at all. There was still Lokia flowing down her lower body, but she must not do that. Seeing that the person in his arms had finally settled down and stopped twisting around, Fu Xuanyi put his hand on her belly and was gentle with her. He said, "My dear, you are too shy. Normally, I would blush for a long time just by holding hands, let alone anything more intimate." Of course Wei Yuxian knew that she was shy easily, but it was natural, so what could be done? Moreover, it is a good thing that things like this will disappear if you let them go too far. This was the education she received since she was a child. She would feel very shy and would never take the initiative. Mainly, she had no idea about Fu Xuanyi. Occasionally, she had the urge to kiss him a few times, but before she could take action, the man took action first, without her needing to take the initiative. She likes Fu Xuanyi. She likes him. She usually thinks about him and wants to kiss him. Although she would be a little shy when staying with him, she was also happy in her heart. Especially when sleeping at night, Fu Xuanyi would hug her to sleep. She liked that warm feeling the most. Fu Xuanyi's embrace was very warm and very safe. It was as if she had nothing to fear if she stayed in his arms, because this man would resist all harm for her. Now, she is also thinking about what she said back then. At the beginning, she had agreed with Fu Xuanyi that she would leave after the baby was born, and Fu Xuanyi would take care of her. And if she wanted to see the baby, she could come at any time, and Fu Xuanyi couldn't stop her. But now, she doesn't want to leave Fu Mansion. There are many reasons. First of all, it is the atmosphere of Fu Mansion. This is the most comfortable place she has ever stayed. At first, when she first came to Fu Mansion, she didn't feel like this because no one here loved her and she felt like an outsider. But now, Fu Xuanyi said personally that he liked her. Mr. Fu and Ms. Fu also liked her very much, and the servants in the house also liked her, making her feel like she was surrounded by love. This is what she has always dreamed of. She wants to get love from more people and more kinds of love. Another reason is that time and knowledge come. She liked Shishi and Zhizi very much. They were her two most important treasures and she couldn't bear to be separated from them. Shishi and Zhizi must stay in the Fu Mansion and cannot run around outside with her. The Fu Mansion will give them the best care and life so that they can grow up happily. She didn't want to be separated from her two children for a moment. But now, she is hesitant to stay in Fu Mansion. Because, after all, she is a person without status. It's no wonder that Wei Yuxian thinks so much. Her background is not a good one, and she still has some inferiority complex when facing a big family like the Fu family. Fu Xuanyi is such an outstanding person, but she herself is so mediocre. The only advantage is that she gave birth to the blood of the Fu family. But she doesn't think this is a big advantage, because others may also give birth to heirs of the Fu family. Also, she couldn't guarantee that Fu Xuanyi would not change his mind. People from wealthy families have everything they want at their fingertips, and Fu Xuanyi's status is unrivaled in Kyoto. How long can his love last? Many men from wealthy families spend their time eating from bowls and looking at what's in the pot. She was afraid that Fu Xuanyi's love would be too short. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Ju Yi. Chapter 128. But now, she still wants to fight to stay in the Fu Mansion, at least for this period of time, even if it is not for Fu Xuanyi, then for the baby. Shishi and Zhizi are still so young that they cannot leave their mother. After thinking about this for a while, the blush on Wei Yuxian's face faded a lot, and she was thinking about how to tell Fu Xuanyi. After a while, she plucked up the courage, turned her head slightly to look at the man, and said, "Actuan, I want to tell you something." Fu Xuanyi saw that she was no longer shy and took the initiative to talk to him. He was in a good mood and asked, "What's the matter?" Wei Yuxian crossed her hands and pinched them here and there, which was a sign of nervousness. She said, I don't want to leave the baby yet, I don't want to leave the baby yet." After hesitating for a while, she finally said it completely. What she meant was that she didn't want to leave Fu Mansion. As smart as Fu Xuanyi, how could he not understand the meaning of her words? He took her hand into his, and put the other hand on her lower abdomen with a little more force, saying, "My dear, never think of leaving her in this life." He said this solemnly, but Wei Yuxian didn't believe it. If Fu Xuanyi changed his mind in the future, wouldn't he be able to drive her out with just one word? But now that she can stay here, she is still very happy. At least for a short time, she will not be separated from Shishi's Hizzy. This is a good thing, but why does she still feel a little tingling in her heart? He turned his head a little further and looked blankly at the man close at hand. Their posture was so intimate, and they had done many intimate things, but she felt that there was still an unbridgeable gap between her and Fu Xuanyi. Forget it, forget about these things. Thinking too much will only make yourself unhappy. She should think of some happy things to make herself feel better. Otherwise, it would be bad to suffer from postpartum depression. Looking at the man's handsome face and those sexy thin lips, she had some urge to kiss the man again. How about being bolder and taking the initiative? Don't always be too timid. Fu Xuanyi was also looking at her, seeing that she was in a daze, as if she was thinking about something, so he did not interrupt her, but let her think. When he noticed her eyes on his lips, he couldn't help but widen the curve of the corners of his mouth, and his smile became even happier. His obedient look seemed like he wanted to kiss him. It would be nice if Guai Guai could take the initiative. She is too timid and extremely shy. This won't work. In the future, they will become even closer. If Guai Guai is so shy every time, he will be the one who suffers in the end. So you need to think of ways to make Guai Guai more proactive and get used to being intimate with yourself. Here, Wei Yuxian was constantly doing mental construction, and her eyes staring at Fu Xuanyi's lips became more and more intense. She never thought that one day, she would have such a strong urge to kiss a man on the lips. I never thought that I would fall in love with someone, such an outstanding man. Wei Yuxian felt extremely nervous when she thought of what she was going to do next. Her small hands came out of Fu Xuanyi's big ones and twisted them together again. His heart also beat faster, and a faint blush appeared on his face again, like burning clouds in the sky, which was really beautiful. After a while of mental construction, she finally mustered up the courage, closed her eyes, leaned in front of the man and kissed him. But her sense of direction was not very good, and her eyes were closed again, so she couldn't find the right position, so she kissed a little farther, and kissed the corner of the man's mouth. The kiss only lasted a moment. As soon as she touched that soft touch, Wei Yuxian ran out of courage, pulled her head back, and continued to lower her head, blushing and heart-beating. She also realized that she kissed in a wrong position, but her courage had been exhausted and she didn't dare to kiss her a second time, so she could only make mistakes. Being able to kiss the corner of a man's mouth is also a huge improvement. This was the first time she took the initiative to kiss someone. Except for Shishi and Zhizi, they are her babies, so they don't count. Fu Xuanyi was still in shock. He never expected that just now, his obedient girl actually kissed him. Although it was only for a moment, so fast that he thought it was an illusion, but the beautiful touch on his lips told him that it was true and not fake. Guai Guai really kissed him. Fu Xuanyi couldn't believe it and looked at the person in his arms with disbelief. The person in his arms lowered his head, and he could only see that her ears and face were red. She must be extremely shy. So, Guigui also likes him, right? Otherwise, why would you take the initiative to kiss him? It's not easy for Guigui to take the initiative to kiss someone with his shy personality. The corners of his mouth became wider and wider, and he looked at the person in his arms with eyes so gentle that his eyes watered. Be good, he called. Wei Yuxian let out a dull huh. With obvious pleasure in his tone, Fu Xuanyi called out again, good boy. Wei Yuxian said huh, again, waiting for the man to speak, wanting to see what he would say. But the man didn't say anything, he just wanted to call her name. For some reason, Wei Yuxian pursed her lips as she felt a little disappointed. Fu Xuanyi thought about the kiss just now and felt that it was not enough. It was too fast and he had not tasted it properly. Therefore, in order to better taste the wonderful taste, Fu Xuanyi lifted Wei Yuxian's head and kissed it. Different from Wei Yuxian's shallow kiss, his kiss was very long and his movements were very gentle, taking his time and lingering with her. Wei Yuxian was immersed in the beautiful feeling brought by the man, her mind went blank, and she responded to the man greenly. Even after so many kisses with men, she was still very unfamiliar, like a child just learning to walk, needing guidance step by step. When Fu Xuanyi saw her responding to him, he was even more reluctant to end it so quickly. He rushed in unimpeded, attacking inch by inch, which disturbed her breath. Outside the window, cicadas were calling incessantly, and a gust of wind blew by, making the leaves creak. Time seems to have stopped at this moment, freezing this beautiful picture. I don't know how long it took, but Wei Yuxian couldn't bear it anymore, and the man let her go, allowing her to breathe heavily and replenish her oxygen. Her face was hunched red, her eyes could not focus, and her chest was heaving violently. She was completely lost. Fu Xuanyi always had a smile on his lips. He looked down at the person in his arms and said, "It's great, dear. I like you the most." When Wei Yuxian heard his words, her heart beat violently again, and her heart felt as sweet as honey. This man rarely says such things. The word like is so heavy that it cannot be said easily. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 129. Because of what the man just said, Wei Yuxian was always in a good and sweet mood, like a sweet woman in love. She yawned and said, "Axuan, I'm sleepy." Her voice was soft and waxy. Fu Xuanyi turned off the light, hugged the person and said, "Go to sleep." Wei Yuxian leaned in the man's arms, smelled the good smell of the man, and slowly fell asleep. A good night's dream, even the dream is sweet. When Wei Yuxian woke up the next day, Fu Xuanyi was no longer around. He had gone to work. Wei Yuxian stared blankly at the ceiling for a while, and couldn't help but think of what happened last night. She felt so embarrassed when she thought that this man was still trying to grab food from Shishi. She pulled up the quilt and covered it under her eyes, leaving only the area above her eyes exposed. She was secretly shy for a while. Then, she forced herself to put away those embarrassing scenes, took a deep breath, the redness on her face disappeared, and got up to wash up. Entering the bathroom, she squeezed out toothpaste and started brushing her teeth, and then looked at herself in the mirror. You won't know until you see it, but you will be shocked when you see it. What are the red marks on her neck? She stopped brushing her teeth, went to the mirror, and opened her eyes wide to see what was on it. As she touched it with her hand, she wondered if it might have been bitten by a mosquito. But it doesn't look like much. Besides, where would mosquitoes appear in their room? Although it is summer and there are many mosquitoes, there are absolutely no mosquitoes in their room. Fu Xuanyi's room is carefully cleaned every day, and it is kept clean. There are also people who come to kill mosquitoes. This kind of thing will not happen. Therefore, the red marks on her neck are definitely not caused by mosquito bites. Suddenly, she felt that this mark looked familiar. She seemed to have seen it somewhere. She was thinking hard while brushing her teeth. Suddenly, she remembered where she had seen this thing. Isn't it just on her neck? In the past, when Fu Xuanyi kissed her neck, there would be this thing on her neck the next day. Last night, Fu Xuanyi nibbled on her neck for a long time. She still felt a little pain, but she didn't take it seriously. Did not expect. After thinking about where this thing came from, Wei Yuxian's face turned red. When she thought that Mr. Fu and Ms. Fu were downstairs and that she would go downstairs later, she blushed so much. This, how can she meet people like this? How could she appear in front of the master and the old lady? Then she felt that Fu Xuanyi must have done it on purpose. Deliberately leaving something so obvious and in this position. He is really not ashamed at all. In this position, how can she block it? It's summer, so you can't wear scarves or high-collared clothes. Wei Yuxian felt that she was too embarrassed to see anyone. She did not dare to appear in front of the master and the old lady until these red marks disappeared. But this doesn't mean she doesn't have to see him if she doesn't want to see him. She still has to go downstairs to eat and do some activities. So, after washing up, she wandered around the room for a while, cheering herself up in her heart, and finally plucked up the courage to go downstairs. When I walked downstairs, I saw that the master and the old lady were indeed sitting on the sofa downstairs, each holding a baby, looking at them with smiles on their faces. When Wei Yuxian went downstairs, she was spotted by the sharp-eyed old lady. The latter smiled and said, "Yuxian, are you up? Come and take a look." Shishi's Hizi is also awake. She just fed her milk and is a little energetic. She asked Wei Yuxian to come over quickly and interact with the babies, talk, and so on, to enhance the relationship between mother and child. Otherwise, the babies will have to sleep again later. Wei Yuxian covered one side of her neck, not daring to walk over, and said, "Old madam, I'm going to have breakfast first and come back later." The old lady didn't notice anything strange. She thought she was hungry and said, "Okay, if you're hungry, go quickly. Don't starve yourself. Now, Yuxian's body is the most important thing." After hearing this, Wei Yuxian walked to the dining table to have breakfast as if she had received an imperial edict. After breakfast, the two children had fallen asleep and slept peacefully. Wei Yuxian wanted to hug the children, but she didn't want to appear in front of the old lady and have the old lady see the thing on her neck. What would the master and the old lady think of her if they saw her? Do you think she is a bad person? In short, she just didn't want to appear in front of her elders with such an image. But Shishi and Zizi are now in the hands of the second elder. Even if the two children fall asleep, the second elder is not willing to let go. Like her, she really missed having two children. After all, it was the bloodline that the Fu family had acquired with great difficulty, so how could it not be rare? The old lady really didn't expect that she would be able to hold two grandchildren in her lifetime. Her son's performance over the years had really prepared her to never have a grandchild in her lifetime. Fortunately, God still favored the Fu family and gave them two little angels. With these two children, the old lady is very satisfied and has no regrets in her lifetime. Wei Yuxian sat at the dining table for a while, enlightening herself in her mind. "It's okay, Wei Yuxian, it's okay. The master and the old lady are both experienced, and they are very considerate. They will definitely not say anything. Relax, don't think of the master and the old lady as being so futile. The last time, when Fu Xuanyi carried him downstairs, the master and the old lady didn't say anything, right?" After enlightening herself in this way, Wei Yuxian's heart became calmer. She stood up and walked over pretending to be nonchalant. While walking, I also paid attention to the expressions of the master and the old lady. But until she sat down next to the old lady's expression did not change at all, it was still the same as before. He didn't ask aloud why her neck was like this. For this, she breathed a sigh of relief. As long as the old lady doesn't ask, it will be fine. It is also proved by the facts that the master and the old lady are not feudal people. Fu's mother noticed the marks on her neck, but she had been there and knew what was going on. She also knew that Yuxian was thin-skinned, so she treated it as if she hadn't seen it. Otherwise, this child might make a big blush. After seeing someone sitting down next to her, she whispered, "Yuxian, look at it, you know how much like you do with that little nose and those little eyes." However, Wei Yuxian didn't see how Hizzy looked like her. The child was still young, so she couldn't tell. When the child grows up in the future, she would be able to tell who she looked like. But no matter who they look like, Wei Yuxian won't care too much, she will still like her children very much. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 130. She asked the old lady in a low voice, "Have they drank milk?" The old lady said, "I just drank it, teased them for a while, and then fell asleep again. There is frozen breast milk in the refrigerator. When the child wants to drink it and Wei Yuxian is not free, she drinks the breast milk in the refrigerator. Wei Yuxian would put some in every day so that the nanny could easily take them out to warm milk for feeding." She gave a soft hum and looked at Hizzy in the old lady's arms. The little guy had just eaten and burped. He played with his grandma for a while and slept soundly. She added, "I want to carry them into the room, and I will read in the room." The old lady didn't have any objections. She just said, "Don't be in a hurry, Yuxian. You are not fully recovered yet. If you don't rush to read, reading will make you nervous." Wei Yuxian knew that the old lady was caring about her, so she smiled at the old lady and said, "It's okay, old madam. I know the rules and won't look at you for too long. I'm bored at home too, so I might as well read more books to pass the time. The time is also good." Fu's mother couldn't help her, so she could only say, "Then you should be careful and rest when you are tired. Don't be brave. We are not in a hurry at this time." Wei Yuxian felt warm in her heart and said, "Okay, I promise you." When she took it from Father Fu, she walked upstairs with the old lady holding Hizzy. Shishi was put on their exclusive wooden bed and fell asleep quietly. The old lady stayed in the room for a while, gave Wei Yuxian a few words, and then walked out. In the room, Wei Yuxian took out the book, put it on the table and read it. I read a book for a while and then looked at the child on the wooden bed. Time passed like this minute by minute. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed since Wei Yuxian gave birth. Wei Yuxian felt much better, so she asked Fu Xuanyi to continue arranging lessons for her. Her plan is to pass the school's assessment when school starts in September, keep up with the original pace, and go to her sophomore year, so that she doesn't have to waste another year. With private one-on-one tutoring, Wei Yuxian's learning progress was very fast. In addition, she was quite smart. If she couldn't understand something after one try, she could get it through 2 or 3 times. Therefore, it only took her 3 months to learn the knowledge of her freshman year. Not only that, she also learned a lot of knowledge and etiquette beyond textbooks. During this time, Wei Yuxian not only had to learn knowledge, but also had to do postpartum repairs and take care of her body. Every day is lived to the fullest. In the blink of an eye, the time came to September. 2 months had passed since Wei Yuxian gave birth. The 2 babies were also 2 months old. They were white, tender, and beautiful. In a few days, the university will start school. If Wei Yuxian wants to go to school, she needs Fu Xuanyi's permission. She works so hard these days just to prepare for school. However, She was not sure what Fu Xuanyi was thinking and whether he would let her go to school. So, on this day, when Fu Xuanyi was resting and the weather was very beautiful, Wei Yuxian told him about this matter. She looked at the man in front of her who was wearing home clothes. He was rarely wearing a suit. He looked much younger and more like an ordinary person. She said, "Actuan, school is about to start." She didn't say the next words, knowing that Fu Xuanyi would understand what she wanted to say. Fu Xuanyi pulled him to sit down on the sofa and said Wei Yuxian looked forward to his next words and looked at him expectantly. But the man just said yes and said nothing again. Wei Yuxian was very anxious. Seeing his reaction, she was afraid that he would stop studying for her, so she quickly said, "I'm thinking of going to my sophomore year after school starts. I've learned everything I need to know about my freshman year." Fu Xuanyi looked at her, stretched out his hand, and pinched her little face. It was soft and tender and felt good to the touch. He pinched it for the first time and wanted to pinch it a second time. With this thought in mind, he did so. So, I pinched her face several times, feeling extremely satisfied. Wei Yuxian saw that his mind was not on her words, but only on pinching her face, so she quickly reached out and grabbed the man's squeezing hand. He said angrily, "Stop pinching me." Only then did Fu Xuanyi stop and answered her, "Okay, I'll go tell the principal. As long as he says a word, his girl will study in the university if she wants to." Wei Yuxian breathed a sigh of relief and said, "But I still have to take the exam. I will go to my sophomore year after passing the exam." Fu Xuanyi looked at her dotingly and said, "It's up to you." Wei Yuxian was completely happy, with a nice smile on her face and said, "Thank you, Ah Xian. You are such a good person." Often just when Wei Yuxian thinks so, Fu Xuanyi will reveal his true colors. Sure enough, the man said again, "My dear, you have to go to school." Wei Yuxian was happy and replied, "Yeah, I'm going to school. I haven't been to school for a long time, so I'm a little nervous." The man looked at him and said nonchalantly, "Guai is going to school. I have less time to see Guai." Only then did Wei Yuxian realize that there was something wrong in the man's words. Fu Xuanyi said so many words for no reason. He must not have just said it casually. He must have other intentions. Could it be that he wants to put forward any conditions? Or do you want to do something to take advantage of her? When she thought about this man's many criminal records, Wei Yuxian became even more determined that it was not easy for a man to say this. She took the initiative and asked, "Do you want to make any other conditions?" Fu Xuanyi looked at her with admiration, as if to say, "You finally have the idea." Wei Yuxian. She took a deep breath, wrung her hands together, and said, "You talk first." She would see if she could accept it. If she really couldn't accept it, she would ask the old lady. The old lady is soft-hearted and treats her so well, so she will definitely let her go to school. Fu Xuanyi grabbed her little hand, played with it, and said, "I have two conditions." As soon as the words came out, Wei Yuxian's eyes widened. What? This time there are still two conditions. Wasn't it just a condition the first few times? Why has the price increased now? She opened her mouth to say something, but in the end she didn't say anything and continued to listen to the man's next words. Fu Xuanyi continued, "First of all, the first condition, dear, your body is not fully recovered yet. I don't worry, you will not go to school again 1 month after school starts." Wei Yuxian frowned slightly after hearing this. She thought about it in her heart. After weighing it for a while, she felt that this condition was not too much. Fu Xuanyi also wanted to do it for her own good. So I nodded and accepted the condition. Next, there is the second condition. Fu Xuanyi spoke slowly, "The second condition is..." He paused for a while before continuing.